Distressing dreams of the event, right?
Correct.
And it seems self-explanatory, but tell me about it.
They're having nightmares and dreams about what happened.
And
frequently, recurrent.
And did the defendant report any of this to you?
She indicated that she had some dreams about it, but not recurrent.
And her journals, or any writings that you saw, do they indicate that she had these recurrent dreams of the event?
No.
Next.
Acting or feeling if the traumatic event.
I'm sorry, acting or feeling?
If the traumatic event.
If the traumatic event.
Were reoccurring.
Okay. What's going on here?
What this symptom is reliving it. You can see typically in people with PTSD, they may just be sitting there and all of a sudden start reenacting it. They're reliving the actual traumatic episode.
So in this case, if we're talking about the killing of Mr. Alexander as the triggering event, that's what we would expect to see, her carrying it out.
Yes.
And any indication anywhere that she has had any of this acting or feeling or carrying out this event?
No.
What is the next one?
Intense psychological distress. At exposure.
Pardon?
There's more.
Oh, okay.
At exposure to cues. Just giving you the shortened version.
All right. So what are you talking about, or what is it talking about there?
When there's cues of the trauma, so in this case, the killing, anything related to Travis, talking about him, symbols, signs that remind Miss Arias of him would cause that internal psychological distress, the feeling of uneasiness and strong emotions related to it.
When it says intense, is that a sort of quantification, if you will, of the distress, or is that something else? When you say intense, what does intense
Strong.
mean? And did you see any of that here?
No.
Did you discuss this issue of what may have been involved with her and Mr. Alexander with the defendant?
Yes.
And did you see any of this intense distress when you spoke with her about it?
No, and she was putting herself in situations to be exposed to that.
When you say she was putting herself in situations to be exposed to that, what are you talking about?
She was writing about him in her journal, attending memorial services.
Okay, so if she's attending the memorial services, what does that indicate to you in terms of this intense psychological distress?
That she's able to cope with it, that there's cues that she's walking towards, and that she's able to psychologically handle that.
And are you talking about the memorial in Mesa?
That's one example, yes.
Okay, next.
Physiological reactivity. To cues of the traumatic event.
Of traumatic event?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, what is that?
What physiological reactivity is a visceral response, a beating of the heart, feeling a very strong physical response to exposure.
Any indication of anything that you've read that shows that on the part of the defendant, that she has this physiological reactivity to the traumatic event?
The only thing that I read that would be related to this is there was a note from her attorney that indicated that...
Well, other than that, do you have anything else?
No.
So does she meet these items here?
No.
Let's talk about...
Wow, really a meticulous take.
Yes, Dee, we'll see what's next.
Items here.
No.
Let's talk about Section C. And what does Section C refer to?
Avoidance.
And how many symptoms are there to choose from here?
7,
And how many of those must be met in order to meet this criteria?
3 or more.
Right? What's the first one?
Efforts to avoid thoughts, feelings, and conversations associated with the trauma.
All right, what do you know about that?
Similar to the stuff that I highlighted before, she was writing about it quite a bit
In her journals? Is that what you're saying?
in her journals.
And how about attending the...
Objection, Judge. Foundation, writing what?
Sustained.
When you're talking about, let's be more specific, you indicated that she was writing in her journals. What is she writing in her journals that indicates that she's not attempting to avoid thoughts, feelings, or conversations associated with the trauma?
She was writing a lot about Mr. Alexander
And
and
was she
talking
saying,
about him.
was she saying good or bad things?
She was saying good things.
And this was, again, after the trauma or after the killing.
Yes.
What else? What's the next?
Efforts to avoid activities, places, or people.
Or people, is that it?
Associated with the trauma. These are all associated with the trauma.
All right. Tell me about this and whether or not she meets this criteria.
She does not meet this criteria.
Tell me why, and specifically give me the examples as to why you think she does not meet this criteria.
She went to his memorial service. She wrote a letter to his family. She was surrounding herself
How about
with,
sending 20 irises to his grandmother? Is that part of that too?
that would be another variable that I would
What else?
consider.
Anything else other than what you just said?
Again, writing about him, talking to mutual friends.
All right. So does she meet that criteria? In other words, do you see her engaging in efforts to avoid the activities, places, or the people associated with the trauma?
She was not putting effort to avoid him.
Next.
Inability to recall an important aspect of the trauma.
Tell me about that.
When people are exposed to traumatic events, most people have an acute memory of what the traumatic event is. But there are times when there are traumatic events that they lose aspects of what happened.
And is this something that the defendant manifested?
She's reporting to have lost a significant amount of time associated with the killing.
So does she, just based on her statements alone, does she meet this criteria?
Purely based on her report of it alone.
So
The
with
answer
this
is
one,
yes.
would you say yes or no, that she meets that criteria?
Based on my knowledge of how memories typically form or surrounding traumatic events, I would not agree that she meets this criteria. Based on her report of it, yes.
So, but based on your schooling and experience, you do not believe that she meets this, right?
That's correct.
Tell me why.
Well, related to traumatic memories specifically, as I highlighted earlier, when people experience a traumatic event, it's not like our day-to-day events that we have. It's hard to remember what we ate for breakfast a week ago or what we wore. That's different with traumatic events. We see the development of some disorders that we see. But there are times that people can become hypervigilant and focused on only aspects of the memory, which causes memory loss. The reason why I don't believe that to be the case with Miss Arias is because of the way that she is reporting the memory loss is not consistent with what you typically see.
First of all, tell us what she is reporting that you found important.
She indicated to me that she had a very large gap in her memory.
And by large gap, how are we talking minutes? What are we talking about?
She told me that she had a several-hour gap.
So we're talking about a several-hour gap. Why is that significant?
The prosecution witness.
Several-hour gap. Why is that significant to you?
That's not how it typically presents with traumatic memories.
Explain to me how it is that it works with a traumatic event and the memory issue.
They tend to lose aspects of the incident, small aspects of the incident. The only time that you see that there's those large aspects that are missing, potentially for several hours, is if there's a severe head injury. For example, I had a patient who had blood coming out of his ear one time as a result of a traumatic incident, or if there's any kind of substance abuse that's involved. But you don't see that long of duration. And there's other inconsistencies with her report.
All right, so the inability to report, one of them is that it's too long of a gap, the time is too long, right?
That's one problem.
What's the other problem, or the other problems as you see it?
What we see with traumatic memories is the more that people talk about them, we see that they tend to gain memory about it. And that's a big part of what we do in treatment. They tend to gain stuff that they thought that they had lost. What I found with Miss Arias is that is not the pattern that she displayed.
What is the pattern that she displayed as to whether or not she recalled items that she didn't previously recall?
If I go back to what she reported to me, she had indicated to me at the time of the killing that she went to go and grab the knife. And then her memory from there was almost completely absent, with the exception of the potential memory that she might have put the knife in the dishwasher. Aside from that, it was completely absent until the point that she hit the Hoover Dam.
Yep.
In terms of what she reported to Dr. Samuels, who I had access to his report, he had indicated to her that
She indicated to him.
I apologize. She indicated to him that she disposed of the weapons and changed her clothing, is what it indicated in his report. The reason why this is important to me is because I saw Miss Arias after Dr. Samuels. If you remember the way I just described it, when we see true memory loss, the more that people talk about it, and Miss Arias has talked about it quite a bit in interviews and with different evaluators, you see an increase of memories. Even if it's just a little bit of an increase of memories, usually it's significant. And in this case, I met with her after Dr. Samuels, so it's showing the opposite pattern that you see in typical traumatic memory.
Anything else? Or is
Related to memory?
Yes, Or are those the reasons that, in your mind, indicate that she did not meet the inability to recall an important aspect of the trauma? First of all, the length, and then second of all, the issue involving her failure to remember as she went along.
I would say that there's another aspect.
And what is that?
What Miss Arias reported to me was that when she reached the Hoover Dam, she looked down at her hands and saw a little bit of blood. And I asked for clarification of that. Was there blood all over? Was there just a little bit of blood? She said there was a little blood on my hand. She said, I knew this meant that I killed him. And I asked her, how do you know that that meant you killed him if you have no memory? She said, I knew I did. So that to me, that's impossible. It's illogical.
Well, why is that impossible?
It's illogical because if all of a sudden a person had blood on their hands and had no memory of the events that just happened, you wouldn't think I just killed someone. You might think I cut my finger, what happened, not I killed somebody.
Right, so that would be she does not meet that one. What is the next item underneath avoidance?
Markedly diminished interest.
Okay, what does that refer to?
What that symptom is it's called what we call psychologist anhedonia. It's a loss of interest and pleasure in activities. What we see in individuals is that they stop engaging with the world. They stop doing the activities that they enjoyed. And with Miss Arias, she continued to engage with people. There was indication in her journal that she was spending time with friends. She had indicated to me that she had an interest in pursuing school. And there was no indication that there was this anhedonia that was present.
What about the fact that shortly within a day of
All right,
killing Mr.
hit the pause
Alexander.
button. You're not going